Thank you for joining and welcome to the webinar, Monitoring-Based Commissioning with Banner Health, brought to you by BuildingFit and the Energy Management Association. I'm Ed Armstrong, Executive Director of EMA. When we first discussed doing this webinar, we were immediately excited by this subject matter because it is so topical and relevant. Monitoring-based commissioning has emerged as one of the most important techniques in energy management. The healthcare sector presents great challenges and opportunities for energy efficiency. Enterprise-wide energy management is enabled by emergent IoT and cloud technologies. And from EMA's perspective, we're proud that our valued members, BuildingFit and ETC Group, are the leads on this project. Now a quick word on CEUs. You will be awarded one AIA LUHSW. That stands for one learning unit, believe it or not, and they count for our energy management professional and certified commissioning authority certifications. You can also use them for lead general education and most often for state engineering boards, but you'll need to check that with them individually. You will automatically receive your certificate by virtue of your registration. Now, if you are watching this on a shared computer and not registered, please contact me at ed@energymgt.org and we'll get you added to the list. Now, for those who are watching this on a recording, in order for you to receive your AIA certificate, you will need to take a short quiz afterward. The link to that quiz is available on your confirmation email. Now, let's turn to our attention to the subject matter experts for today's webinar. I am pleased to introduce Shawn Mathiesen, Remote Operations Manager for Banner Health. As the Remote Operations Manager, Shawn helps manage the collaborative effort to manage building environmental systems for Banner Health's 28 hospitals and healthcare facilities. Shawn has deep experience in installing, repairing, and managing large HVAC systems to maximize energy efficiency, meet compliance requirements, all the while ensuring a comfortable environment for Banner Health patients and staff. Joining Shawn is April Guymon. She is Monitor-Based Commissioning Director for BuildingFit. April leads the Monitoring-Based Commissioning team at ETC Group, leveraging her experience in recommissioning projects with her knowledge of the BuildingFit analytics and SkySpark monitoring software platforms. Her hands-on experience work at facilities in a variety of industries includes healthcare, higher education, government, and central utility plants. With that, I'll turn it over to our speakers.
So first I want to introduce the learning objectives for this webinar. We'll start by talking about the organizational structures. So here we'll touch on Banner's internal structures and external partnerships that make monitoring-based commissioning possible. We'll also talk about the analytic technologies that have been successful tools for Banner's team to determine where they use their resources. Next, we'll discuss monitoring as it applies to important metrics beyond energy. So that in this case, that includes occupant comfort and compliance. We'll also talk about reporting to keep your entire organization up to speed on progress, goals, and to get buy-in on the monitoring-based commissioning program. Finally, we'll talk about how to implement all of these ideas. Okay, so to set the stage of why we need monitoring-based commissioning, I want to talk about 10 years ago, buildings would typically go through a recommissioning project, and at the end, everyone would walk away knowing that some of those savings would degrade or that the energy use would drift up. And that's shown here with this blue arrow coming down. Those are the energy savings. And then this arrow shooting back up. Those were typical drift degradation after a recommissioning project. So the concept of monitoring-based commissioning really came out of a need to stop drift. Monitoring-based commissioning is a set of services and tools that are designed to maintain savings. And it is also a springboard to really push recommissioning projects to even better optimization, such as monitoring the building through seasonal changes and tweaking the sequences to make sure it performs at its best through those changes. And monitoring-based commissioning practices can yield even deeper savings as time goes on. So for the next slide, I'm going to turn the time over to Shawn to talk about how his organization structure is integral to a successful monitoring-based commissioning program.
April described, our old model was to utilize the recommissioning at the facility level, but the problem was that our facility staffs were siloed. They each were a proud representation of their facility. However, their eclectic skill sets were limited to those at each sandlot. There was a lack of cohesion amongst facility services throughout the organization. Each facility was its own team without a broad view of the organizational efforts. This quote reminds me of the path we've chosen to take. First, we did what was necessary. We reorganized facility services into a corporate structure and created the Remote Operations Center to oversee facility services technology, building management systems, and energy management. We did what was possible by implementing system-wide standards and pursuing energy savings programs systematically through the major medical centers. And we are now getting to the phase that was originally thought just a fantasy. Now we are a single team with the combined resources of talent throughout the organization and a single vision and shared goals. We are breaking into what others never thought possible. When you look at the two models side by side, where we are today versus where we were at when we started, it's night and day. We are providing a better service across the organization, more efficiently. You cannot replicate this model without the unification of your resources. It would be cost prohibitive for each facility to have their own BMS technician, technology specialist, and analyst to support their effort. But our team could not do it on our own. We still need to shore up support for the organization by finding the right vendors to partner with. You won't necessarily know all the perfect relationships from the design. It should be an evolution where you find the right vendors that share the same vision you do. For us, we look to find support in the faulty text analytics software, where we've chosen BuildingFit. We also found that we needed a way to keep a close eye on our chiller performance, where we chose to use the product ClimaCheck to help us identify issues with our chillers before they became catastrophic when possible. We needed engineering support to help us bring the monitoring-based commissioning to the next level and help us find those hidden opportunities. We chose ETC. We also know that although we have some of the best controls technicians on the market, we cannot possibly handle all of the needs throughout the organization, but we can make great firefighters. We have regional specific and system specific support partnerships created that allow us to both be successful, and most marketably of those is ClimaCheck, who we work with to share responsibility and maintain consistently high levels of support throughout the organization. As we transition to an all tritium-based BMS system, it's essential to have their support. We also knew that our growing technological sophistication, that we wanted to leverage this increased ability by aligning it with our chiller maintenance contracts. That could leverage the insight and help us keep the system in peak performance. The major supporter of this has been Beller Mechanical in our Arizona facilities. Whoever you choose, remember that you're looking for consistency and support, not necessarily the vendor. And a great example of this level of support, well, I'll actually hold off and describe that here in a moment. Many of our local teams were skittish to the new model. It was a lot of change all at once, and they were comfortable with their sandlot. We regularly found that there were two common concerns amongst the skeptics. The first was that the rock was coming in as Big Brother and was going to take over their facility. That's the last thing any of us wanted. We want to work with the local staff together to accomplish great things. We want to help find solutions with them. The second major concern expressed was a constant doubt that we would be able to achieve the savings we projected while maintaining or improving the level of performance throughout the organization. There were three things that I found to be necessary tools to address these concerns. The first is frequent, honest communication with active listening to the concerns of the facility. Once they voice their concerns to you, you need to support them in addressing them. You need to show them you're committed to them. Finally, you must deliver the results you promised. If you offer support, it needs to be there. If you specify savings, hit your mark. They don't want to hear about what you can do. They want to see it. Great example of this level of support is we had a catastrophic chiller failure at one of our facilities in the middle of summer, and the board failure that chiller had failed was going to keep that chiller out for a significant period of time. However, the facility did not have the resources necessary, and they reached out to us, where we were quickly able to identify that the lack of tonnage meant that the plant was not going to be able to provide the necessary cooling for the facility. We mobilized the team and partnered with ETC to find quick ways to reduce building load imperceivably to the occupants while we mobilized a temporary air-cooled chiller to sustain the load while the chiller was repaired. This level of support previously was unprecedented. It had never been done. April, I'll hand it back over to you.
Great, thank you, Shawn. Okay, we want to talk, now that Shawn spoke to the structures and the organization that has made this successful at Banner Health, we want to now kind of turn the attention to the analytic technologies that have really also driven the finding of the issues and the success to gain energy savings. I wanted to share some stats on what is currently deployed at Banner. Together with Banner, we've implemented a single analytic platform, so one place, one login, that unifies data across all 28 of their connected facilities. Data from the building automation system gets uploaded in real time and put through 170 different rules. I'll talk about some examples of these rules in a minute, but basically they are condition-based algorithms to detect fault within the system or equipment operation. There are also 67 total KPIs or key performance indicators available to assist with diagnostics of the systems and monitoring. Data is also coming from 37 chiller refrigerant circuit monitoring devices. Shawn will talk a little more about this in some detail later, but I wanted to point that out. It's pretty cool. The next bullet point here, this one is pretty impressive to me. There are over 13,000 terminal units connected to this analytics platform enterprise-wide at Banner. That's a lot of terminal units. The facility with the most terminal units has over 1,600 in a single hospital. So that's just a lot of equipment to monitor, and you can see how trying to centralize and manually go through this data would just not be possible without modern analytical technologies. I selected a sample of rules that would likely be useful across a majority of buildings and systems. Of course, depending on the systems you have, your essential rule list may be a little different from this one. So you can see the first three on my rule list are targeting air handling units. So these are rules designed to detect chilled water and hot water valve leaking, discharge air temperatures, set point resets, so optimization resets. Also targeting making sure your economizer is functioning properly. The next one is for boiler cycling. And the next two are for your chilled water plant. Are your chillers staging properly, and are the set points, chilled water set points being met? Important things for overall operation. The next one is for meters. It's really important to think through how you're going to monitor your meters. Meters, whether it's that, whether it's utility bills or if it's, I'm talking more to like a power interval meter. If you're relying on that for measurement, you want to make sure your data is gathered properly. The next one is for point sensor failures. This is really critical. There are just thousands of points out there collecting information in the real world and transmitting them into data. And if any of those go wrong, you've got garbage in and you're going to get garbage out. You're going to have bad results. So making sure that none of those have failed is critical as well. For pumps, I threw in here, this is kind of a salute to overrides, which is a classic cause of drift when things get overridden and no longer work automatically and efficiently. And then the next four are speaking to the sheer volume of terminal units. And that's why I decided to put 4 rules on this list that are specifically dedicated to terminal units. Really getting to the sheer volume quickly through automated rules is really, really critical. And I'll let Shawn speak a little more to his experience with these analytical rules.
So it's tools like these that are key to our team to find those issues that have been previously masked by the facility. So for instance, using these TU tools, let's say that there was a VAV that historically was flowing air when it should not have been, but it was being compensated for by a reheat valve that was opening. There was likely never a complaint based upon the comfort, but the energy penalty was being paid. Without tools like this, in order to allow us to find these issues, I mean, when you're looking at, over 13,000 VAVs, it just gets lost. So these tools are incredibly valuable for us. April, I'll hand it back to you.
Great, thanks for that input, Shawn. It's always great to hear the end user's real experience with these things. So adds a lot of value. Thank you. Okay, so this next slide, I wanted to get into just a little deeper example of how analytics can deliver results. And sometimes it is very straightforward, which will be this example. There was a building that had just completed a recommissioning project. And by monitoring high-level KPIs like the building energy use, the fan power, reheat load, we noticed drift occurring. One of the contributing issues we identified was what you're seeing here. The terminal unit scheduling started to slowly get rolled back, and the occupancy schedule no longer matched what the original design intention of the overall project was. The rule that you're seeing here, this visual, every time there is a little purple block, that indicates a fault. And in this case, that would indicate that occupancy is not matching the intended occupancy schedule. So you can see here, it's just a little bit during each night and then on Saturdays. So we reported this back to Shawn and Shawn's team, and we were all together able to have a conversation with the facility engineers and talk to them and help try to understand what was happening. And what they let us know is that during the extreme summer temperatures of Arizona, which are very extreme, they were struggling to maintain their building temperature set points, their cooling set points during the day. And they had this really old control system at all of the terminal units, and it kept as we dug deeper, we found out that it was mysteriously resetting the controller cooling temperatures to 80 degrees at night. So no wonder they couldn't make it through the day. There's no way to recover from that. So through Shawn's technical support team at The Rock, they helped them to work through those controls issues, resolve that, and bring that set point down from 80 to a reasonable number. And we were able to keep the majority of the savings and not compromise the comfort of the facility. So this is a good example of a straightforward analytic combined with that structural organization Shawn talked about to really deliver valuable savings to the facility. Okay, now this next example is my example of analytics that aren't always straightforward to deliver results. So this is another facility that at the end of a recommissioning project went into monitoring-based commissioning, and we saw a very similar story as the last one. The savings started to evaporate. And you can see that here on this with these giant red arrows showing you those are the savings on that chart, and they are just dropping down. We reviewed our KPIs, all of the things we could think to review to try to figure out what was going amiss. And we were kind of stumped for a while. Everything that had been done appeared to be persistent. You can see on the bottom of the screen is a KPI for for average fan power. And you can see it increasing month by month, but not nearly enough to justify those loss of savings. I should also mention that this facility had a data center. And this data center was cooled by what are called CRAH units, or computer room air handling units. And there were a total of 18 of these units, which honestly we had all largely ignored because, well, for a number of reasons, but there were 18 of these fans running out there, and they were just little and numerous, and we kind of ignored them, and they didn't get included in this average KPI. Okay, so then as we kept diving in and digging deeper, we found that the UPS server the UPS that's serving the data center, and in particular the one that was serving these these CRAH units, the energy on this one completely shot up in March, exactly aligning with that degradation of savings. And if you look at the KPI at the bottom, this is the KPI after we included the fan powers from all those little fans. And you can see in March, all of a sudden, that huge jump of 40 kW. It turned out that these CRAH units had a programming error that caused half of the fans to jump to 100%. And the lesson that we're reminded of here is that the devil really is in the details. There really isn't a magic deploy these analytics and everything will work perfectly to identify everything out of the box. That's just not where these analytical tool technologies are at this point in time. And so it's important to stay really curious. When your analytic results aren't squaring with other observations, be sure that you've got the tenacity to really dig deeper and tease out causes of issues.
So I just want to take a moment and describe a situation that we had back in 2018. It speaks to the necessity of having that additional information. In the beginning of 2018, we were identifying some performance concerns with several of our chillers that we had just connected into the ClimaCheck at one of our facilities. When we noticed the concerns, we reached out to the existing vendor who had the service contract on the chillers, and they went out several times and found no issues. For a couple of months, we went back and forth with them. We were getting nowhere. We tried to share with them our data. They were not very receptive of it, and you know, told us that theirs was better. We actually reached out to a new vendor and asked them to review the conditions. Of the 350-ton chillers, one of those was found to be 550 pounds of refrigerant short. Another one was found to be 350 pounds short. After these issues were corrected, along with a handful of other issues, we saw about a $20,000 per year savings in performance on those chillers. The facilities there at the facility had even been telling us that's just how those chillers operate. There's nothing wrong with them. The original chiller maintenance contract vendor had been telling us there's nothing wrong with the chillers, but our data showed us otherwise, and we were able to find that difference that you get between a vendor and a partnership with the new entity that took over our chiller maintenance contract. By having somebody who wants to work with us and our technologies towards the common solution.
Yeah, that was such a big win. That was a really cool example. Okay, so we have all of this data, this huge amount of data flowing into our analytics platform. And at some point, we just had to ask ourselves, what else should we be doing with this data? And I think the first most obvious answer is monitor comfort. And the reason I say that it's the most obvious answer is because if you ask most facility engineers or managers about their pain point, it is almost always that the phone is ringing constantly with hot and cold calls. And these are fundamentally comfort issues. If you can use data to reduce the number of times that phone is ringing, you will have moved that team from, you'll have moved that team into a much better position to manage their facility. You also will shift your role as a consultant or a provider from being just another vendor to a real partner. And this is kind of what Shawn is talking about, is trying to really create a more useful partnership. And so what we find is that if we can help these facilities reduce the time they spend on these hot and cold calls, another benefit is that they have more time. If they're an overloaded facility, they might have more time then potentially to spend on other valuable energy efficiency measures. So in this report on the screen, that big 85% in the circle, that is the percent of time that the zones are meeting temperature set point. And we've also tried to include a very actionable table. That's this table called Best Opportunities to Improve Comfort, that shows the top zones that are not performing very well as far as comfort goes. They're not meeting their zone temperature set point, in this case, at all, ever. And so by working off of this list and working together with the facility and getting these zones resolved, the hope is that 85% number can go up, that KPI can go up, and they can move on to other things instead of spending a lot of time on comfort issues. Okay, the next consideration beyond energy is compliance. In the case of Banner, hospitals have all kinds of environmental compliance considerations. A really, really good example is in operating rooms. ORs have to maintain zone pressure, percent relative humidity, and zone air temperature within specified ranges in order to maintain optimal environment for life safety of the patient. So those are all things that are measured and controlled by the BAS. So it just makes logical sense to include those in a robust monitoring program. Also, Shawn has had a lot of experience with using this data for compliance, for regulation compliance, or for showing compliance. Shawn, could you speak to that?
Yeah, so whenever you have an inspection to regulate your compliance, you're going to always be asked for the data. We typically, historically, like to utilize the building management systems in order to trend that data and be able to provide it whenever needed. However, things happen to building management systems where sometimes you lose the trend data. Sometimes the trend gets disabled, things like that. Versus when we've got that backup, that additional resource of all of this data being accumulated in a single platform, web accessible for the masses that can be easily exported, it provides a tremendous value. And we've actually experienced that in some of our facilities where during the middle of their inspection, they call us freaking out because they don't have the information they're being asked for. And we're able to provide that facility's leadership with that documentation so that they then have the reassurance and the coverage. April, I'll hand it back to you.
Cool, thanks for sharing that. Okay, so we've touched on, I wish we had more time, touched on the analytical technologies and the benefits of using them for energy and other things. The next topic we want to touch on is reporting. So facility level reporting is really critical for setting and meeting goals with the facility. If you don't measure where you are, if you don't step on the scale, you can't track your progress. So the most important KPI that I'm showing here is energy use. So through, and you can measure that through utility bills or interval meters or whatever you have available. And that's a really important part of making sure that the facility is on track. So in this case, these bullet charts off to the side, this little black bar is showing where they are. And if they're in the green, that means they're meeting their target. Great. If they're in the yellow or the red, that means that they're over their target. So it's just a quick way to share with them how they're doing. The other really cool thing that the ROC has implemented is they've set savings targets for the facility. So in this case, there's this facility saving target is $2,000 for the year-to-date number. You can see that this facility in particular is hitting almost $11,000 in total savings at the same time. So they've exceeded their target overall. Sharing these, if you have an organization that is setting goals or targets, sharing them is just super critical so that they may remain transparent. You can track the progress and everybody's on the same page and nobody feels like they're getting in trouble for something they didn't even know about later. The next piece that's really important when thinking about reporting is not only just to show the facility how they're doing, but also to give them the right path to continue on meeting their targets or to exceed their targets or to get back on track if they're not meeting them. So this is an example of a high priority open note table showing them the different measures that they could be working on to move towards their goal and get back on track if they need to. Okay, so that we talked about facility level reporting and some ideas there. It's also very useful to think about enterprise-wide reporting. As the MBCx program has evolved at Banner, Shawn's team knew that it would be really key to consolidate all of the various information into one place. So all of those facility KPIs and performance numbers into a single place. And that's really what this enterprise report, this is just a small portion, it's a fairly long report, is showing here. So Shawn, I'll have you chime in here and talk about the value that these reports or this perspective of having everything all together has brought to Banner.
Sure. So we've talked about the original where everybody had their own facility and it was that siloed mentality. What this does is it opens up those blinders and allows everybody to see how they are actually performing benchmarked against everybody else, and as well report up that progress all the way to the corporate level that's now trying to oversee all of that progress at once. That top-down push as far as the direction that we're going and the savings objectives is crucial. You know, we talked about the savings targets that we set for each facility. Those savings targets are actually then removed from the operational budget of each facility. So they have a vested interest in trying to work with us in order to achieve those savings. Otherwise, they're going to have variances within their budget that they need to report to. And we have not only transparent communication between us and the facility, but also us through the corporate structure. So any challenges that we are facing, we're open and transparent about so that we can all stay on that same page. This report kind of gives us that ability when we look at that target EUI for each facility and how they're actually performing in comparison to it. It gives a quick demonstration of that information. Another report that's really valuable, and it's actually become a fun one amongst the facilities, is the chiller plant efficiency. This is an example of where we can drill down to the specifics, and the specifics of this one allows them to actually have a bit of a competition. The guys not only in my office but also out there in the facilities are constantly pushing to see who has the best performing chiller plant as far as their kW per ton that is being produced. So it again engages and provides useful information that they can then look at and say, well, why is it that this facility is performing at 0.79 kW per ton versus these other facilities that were performing at, 0.38? And then you're able to say, okay, well, maybe there is a design issue here that we could then implement into our standards and update and make sure that as we're building new facilities or as we're updating new facilities, we're implementing those best practices. April?
Great. Okay, a final note on enterprise-wide reporting. And maybe this is, a little bit Big Brother, speaking to Shawn's slide earlier, a little bit of a Big Brother element of reporting, but this is super useful for Shawn's team and kind of the organization's leadership to understand which facilities are making progress to close work orders generated through monitoring-based commissioning. So I'm teasing about the Big Brother part, but really the value here is that Shawn's team can figure out where they need to offer additional help. So for instance, on this bar chart, horizontal bar chart here that says closed notes closed in quarter 1, you can see that one facility has closed 58 separate issues. And then there's some facilities that made no progress. They've closed 0. And so that raises some questions about, do these facilities that haven't closed anything, do they need additional support? Do they need, technical expertise they might lack, or things like that the ROC really has to offer them? So, and then this other one next to it is showing the total number of open notes that are there, so that we can all understand, well, how much work is there at each facility that could be worked on and gain energy efficiency at that facility. So this is another cool, hopefully this could inspire somebody to think through how either at your own facility or as a consultant, you could help provide better unified enterprise-wide reporting.
April, I'm actually going to back up a slide and jump on a little bit of your information here, if you don't mind. But
go ahead.
Again, this provides, it may seem Big Brother, but really, again, it's interpreting that information. We're not there to penalize them because they're not closing out these notes. What we're there to do is to support them in finding a path for them to be able to effectively close the notes. A lot of the times, we're integrated in with the work order system, and we manage that as part of the technology portion of the remote operations center. So we're able to then identify for them, the capacity of their resources, and based upon the additional ask that we're putting out there for this energy side, it helps them then come with the data to the table at the corporate level and say, I need additional resources, and this is why. So going on from there, there was no roadmap for us when we looked to deploy this process. What we did was plan and prepare the best as possible while knowing that we will inevitably have challenges to the plan. Every technologically associated deployment I have ever experienced is faced with change management. Because of the giant challenge ahead, I recommend start small and then grow it and adapt as you learn. We did not start with just a full-on deployment because we knew that it wouldn't be possible. What we did is we started with a test case. We proved the process. We proved the results. And then we began to scale up, and we took it off, in chunks. It kind of goes back to that whole idea of how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So start small, work big, continue to evaluate your performance, and constantly update those standards. Because again, we're constantly growing within Banner, and we're constantly updating facilities. Having the design and construction standards readily available to hand them for best practices as they're starting a new project is invaluable, and it helps us overall become more efficient. You got to stay flexible also in this process. And then from there, I'll turn it over to you, Ed.
Thank you so much, Shawn. We really appreciate it. That concludes today's webinar. We'll take some questions for our panelists momentarily. First, a quick reminder about CEUs. You have all earned one AIA LUHSW, one learning unit, for today's attendance. You will receive, by virtue of your having registered, and importantly your email and proper name, you will receive a certificate via email that that gives you credit for this. Now, occasionally I get questions, I attended it, but without registering, and I would like to get credit for this. And if that's the case and you watched it on a colleague's computer or what have you, just get in touch with me at ed@energymgt.org, and we can get you added to that list. So with that, let's see if we have some questions for our panelists. Okay, here we go from Lisa. Are you able to download operating room reports automatically and easily?
I can speak to that one. I would say the short answer is yes, but only through some development. So ETC Group and BuildingFit has worked to create those reports through just really some custom technology and create those. So, you know, it's not something that we just pushed a button out of the existing analytics software platform. It's something that we've had to develop ourselves, if that answers your question. But now it's easy after a lot of development.
Okay, thank you. Here's another from Brad. What does the future of monitoring-based commissioning look like?
Oh, I think there's a lot to talk about here. Shawn, why don't you go first, and then I'll follow up with anything you might miss.
So again, what we're trying to utilize, I mean, that's a bit of a loaded question. What we're trying to do is find all the things that have been hidden all these years and to keep these facilities on track nonstop. It's been an evolution, and I don't expect that it's going to look the same in a week or even, you know, a couple days from now. We're constantly evolving this.
Yeah,
okay,
totally.
Let's move along.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Did you have more info? Feel free to jump in.
I guess I'll just say really quickly, I think it won't look anything like it looks like now in even just a few years. I think the technology is changing rapidly. Capabilities are expanding. So I think we'll be in a really different place. I think one thing I could kind of share that, you know, we're working on internally is machine learning and applying that instead of condition-based algorithms. So you know, that's just one example of the kinds of technology changes that we're going through that should really change how we approach monitoring-based commissioning.
Okay, great. We have another question here. This is from Jalen. What are the dollar savings amounts based on, and how accurate are they?
Okay, so I think I could probably speak to this one. So there were a lot of places where we had dollar savings amounts. So I'm not 100% sure which ones you're talking about, but built into the rules that I was showing you before, some of them do have automated savings estimates on there, and so those are annualized savings estimated. So for instance, if you had a leaking hot water valve, those are pretty straightforward to calculate, and so those are built in. Not every rule has that built into it, and so some of those still require maybe some manual effort if it's necessary to report those numbers. So you know, the technology is getting pretty good to be able to you know, that we can estimate savings, but most of it is still reviewed from us as the engineers to be sure that we're showing something realistic and accurate, and that, as Shawn said, you don't want to tell someone something and then have it not be true. So the technology helps a lot and helps expedite it, but it isn't the only tool that we use.
Okay, thank you. Now, this is an interesting one. I suspect Shawn will have something to say. It's from Julie. How do you handle a facility that doesn't want to participate, not a team player?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have those individuals that are, again, they're really proud of their sandlot, and so they don't want to participate in the program. But that's where it became essential to have this corporate restructuring, the reorganization that we had, so that we can have that top-down communication and that sharing of the goals. It's really difficult for them to not want to participate when that's a requirement. It's a shared goal that we all have to accomplish.
Okay. I guess here's sort of a procurement question. Again, another from Brad. How did you select the technology to adopt corporation-wide?
That is a loaded question. So the technology, are we talking about the building automation system? Are we talking about ClimaCheck? Are we talking about
BuildingFit?
SkySpark and BuildingFit? Yeah, there's a ton of technologies that we're utilizing, but what we've often looked for is basically a open source, non-proprietary, that we can partner with good vendors that provide the best value out there. So for instance, the building automation systems, we have transferred or are moving over to transferring all of our facilities into an N4 platform, a Tritium N4 platform, which allows us to integrate with various different building automation systems, as well as can be supported by numerous vendors, and is easily web supported through different applications. It's a very flexible program. Similarly, we chose SkySpark on that same basis. However, ETC's taken SkySpark to a whole nother level, and that's where they've rebranded it BuildingFit as a, what's the official term there, April?
Well, it's a software company. Yep.
Okay. And then ClimaCheck was really revolutionary as far as us never hearing of a product similarly that could produce what they do. For those of you that are not familiar with ClimaCheck, I highly recommend you check it out. It's a very useful tool.
Okay, that's great. If I may just follow up on it, I assume we're talking about a lot of legacy systems. I mean, I would assume Banner Health has made acquisitions over the years, and they, probably, not are all compliant with one system. So that open source, I presume, is a pretty important attribute for you.
Right. Yeah. So you're absolutely correct. A lot of our systems had, and we're very happy with their proprietary building automation systems. That there was a culture shock when we came in and said we're not going to be further expanding this system, and we would begin transferring it over to a Tritium web-based system. But they've come around as they see the opportunity and the benefit that brings them. So I think that it's been a big win.
Okay, great. Let's see, from Julie. This is kind of the inverse of the question we asked earlier about what if a given facility didn't want to buy into the overall corporate plan. This is kind of the reverse perspective. How did you get the corporate, the C-suite level support for this, Shawn?
So again, you can't improve until you have data. So what we did is we went and started small, and we proved the concept. Once we had proof of concept, then it was simply expanding that proof of concept. And when you got the data doesn't lie, and it's a hard thing to turn away from. We built the credibility through that initial concept's proof, and it just carried through.
That which gets measured gets improved. So, excellent. Well, we have no more questions at this point, so I guess we'll wrap it up. I would like to, again, thank so much our presenters, Shawn Mathiesen of Banner Health, April Guymon, BuildingFit. I'm Ed Armstrong with the Energy Management Association. For all the people that have signed on, we really appreciate it, and we will reward you with a continuing education point that you can use for your various certifications. Thank you, and have a good afternoon.